They blocked the road. 3 golf carts, 2 folding chairs, and one woman in a lemon-yellow blouse standing dead center, arms crossed like she was posing for a statue of local tyranny. I'd been up since 5 a.m. hauling feed and fixing a busted gate. I was sweaty, dusty, and already in no mood for HOA theatrics. But here she was, Karen Delacroix, president of the Mesa Creek Homeowners Association, standing like she owned the sun. "You can't drive through here," she said without even a hello. I blinked. "I live here." She gestured behind her at the makeshift barricade. One of the golf carts had a laminated sign taped to the windshield that said, "Private Community. Members Only." That was funny. Last I checked, the gravel road cut through my family's land long before the subdivision behind her was built. "This is a shared access point under provisional HOA jurisdiction," she said, smiling like a politician who's never lost an argument in her life, because no one dares argue with her. I looked past her, up the slope to my grandfather's old barn. The property line ran just before the mesquite grove, and always had. I had the deed to prove it. Had the damn surveyor come out last month just to confirm. But Karen didn't care about deeds. She had bylaws. "You'll need to file a transit permission request," she said. "Hey, what?" She handed me a clipboard. Printed packet. 4 pages. Signatures required. HOA seal in the corner. "I'm not in your HOA," I said flatly. "Well," she said, stepping slightly to the side but not enough to let me pass, "that's a conversation we're all about to have. Hey folks, if you've ever had to deal with HOA nonsense or power-hungry neighbors, you're gonna love this one. Hit like if you believe property rights still matter. And comment where you're watching from. We love seeing the community behind this channel. Don't forget to subscribe. We post a new story every day." I inherited the ranch 3 months ago. Didn't expect it. Grandpa and I hadn't spoken in years. He was a hard man, quiet and set in his ways. But when the envelope arrived, thick and legal and full of signatures, I packed my tools, quit my job in Flagstaff and came down to Stone Ridge Hollow, population 2,000 and some change. The ranch wasn't big. 45 acres of scrub, fence line, and a barn held together with hope and rust. But it was mine. No mortgage. No neighbors. Or so I thought. The first time I saw the HOA, it was during a morning ride down the Southern Trail. I followed the old fence line and nearly ran into a dog fountain. A literal marble dog fountain. With uplights. Behind it, rows of beige houses with identical mailboxes and flags that said, "Live Laugh Lake." I rode back home and found a flyer taped to my gate. "Welcome to the Mesa Creek community." With a note in pen. "Please reach out to discuss integration. Karen Delacroix, President." I crumpled it and moved on. But Karen didn't. The next week, a letter about unregulated agricultural noise. Then, an anonymous complaint about the presence of wildlife inconsistent with community standards. I assumed they meant my goats. Then, a certified letter claiming border ambiguity and requesting a temporary jurisdiction extension for review. I laughed. Burned the letter in a coffee can. But she kept coming. Always polite. Always smiling. Always holding something in a plastic folder. Now here we were, Karen, her golf cart militia, and a clipboard with my name spelled wrong. "You've been using this road freely," she said, "but it runs through the HOA's South Scenic Corridor. We maintain it. We keep it safe. We manicure the wildflowers. I mowed that grass last week." She looked offended. "With what permits?" That was the day I realized this wasn't going away. This wasn't a neighborly misunderstanding. This was a campaign. She didn't want me to comply. She wanted me to disappear. And when I refused to back down, she filed an emergency motion to suspend transit access for non-compliant parcels. Then she called the water district. One morning I woke up and nothing came out of the tap. That's when I knew she was willing to starve me off my own land. They didn't want me there. I could feel it the second I pulled into the parking lot of the Mesa Creek Community Center. The way people paused mid-step to glare at the mud on my tires. The way conversation stopped when I walked past. Inside, everything smelled like lemon polish and power. 8 board members sat at a long folding table, each with a nameplate and a bottle of spring water. At the center, wearing a charcoal gray suit and a pin shaped like an eagle holding a clipboard, sat Karen Delacroix. She tapped the mic once. "The meeting will now come to order." I raised my hand. "Excuse me?" "Sir, this is a closed HOA session. I got a notice that my land was under review." She gave a tight smile. "Ah yes. You're the ranch inheritor? Name's Eli. Eli Mercer." She glanced at a folder in front of her. Your parcel sits adjacent to the scenic corridor and is currently being considered for zoning reclassification. Agricultural to recreational. She said it like she was talking about the weather. Like they were choosing between planting begonias or petunias. I never requested that, I said. You didn't need to, she replied smoothly. The HOA board can submit a zoning proposal for any bordering property that may impact community aesthetics. Someone 2 seats down, a man with a Bluetooth earpiece and a shirt tucked too tightly into his khakis, added, and yours has livestock. A barn. Unpaved roads. It's a ranch, I said flatly. Karen folded her hands. That's precisely the concern. I tried to explain. I had the original deed. The survey from last month. Photos of the fence line from 1964. But they didn't care. You are not a recognized member of the Mesa Creek Homeowners Association, Karen said, and therefore you are not eligible for voting, comment, or grievance privileges at this time. So you can make decisions about my land, I said, but I don't get a say? She smiled. That's how governance works. Outside, I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, engine running, trying to calm my pulse. That's when a woman knocked on the window. Mid-50s, jeans, sun visor, strong stance. She looked like someone who grew up bottle-feeding calves and still knew how to swing a hammer. I'm Sarah, she said. I live on the East Ridge. Saw what happened in there. I nodded. You part of the HOA? She smirked. Used to be. She handed me a worn-out manila folder. Here's every complaint Karen's filed in the last 6 months. All public record. Half of them are against people who don't even live here full-time. I flipped through. Parking violations. Fence height discrepancies. Wind chimes too loud. One guy was cited for having a bird feeder too close to HOA boundaries. She doesn't want neighbors, Sarah said. She wants subjects. That week I got a letter from the county. Notice of zoning review. Parcel #MC182. Proposed change, agriculture community recreation. Initiated by Mesa Creek HOA. I called the zoning office. They said I had 10 days to respond before it advanced to preliminary review. I asked, what happens after that? They said, you could lose your right to raise livestock, use heavy equipment, or install new structures. Might be fined for violating residential noise codes. All on land I owned. So I did the only thing I could. I printed everything. Made copies. Sent certified letters. Hired a land use attorney in Tucson. Then I drove straight to the County Board of Zoning Appeals with a folder, a photo of Grandpa leaning on a fence post, and a statement. My land is not a rec center. It's a ranch. And it's my family's legacy. But Karen had already made her move. The next day, a crew in orange vests showed up on my land, saying they were there to begin preliminary soil inspection for the HOA's community expansion plan. I asked them who sent them. They said Karen Delacroix. I told them to get off my property. They said the area was in jurisdictional flux. I called the sheriff. And that was when I learned Karen had filed a temporary jurisdiction claim based on an uncontested corridor expansion, claiming that my South Acre appeared abandoned and uncared for. By the time the deputy arrived, the crew had already taken soil samples. One guy even marked my fence posts with neon flags. I pointed to the survey line. The deputy shrugged. You'll need to settle that in court. Isn't this trespassing? Hard to say, he replied. If it's being reviewed, it's kinda in limbo. I looked out over the field. Karen stood 50 yards away in a white sun hat, sipping iced tea. She smiled and waved. The town hall was packed. More people than I expected. Probably 100, most of them HOA folks in crisp polos, name tags, and the kind of energy that said, volunteered to run the bake sale and never gave back the power. Karen stood at the podium like she'd been born there. Behind her, a slideshow played. A green field, happy kids tossing frisbees, yoga mats on sun-dappled grass. In big letters, Mesa Creek Community Green Space Proposal. It was my land. The south field. The barn. Even the fence. All of it in the background of her glossy PowerPoint utopia. She smiled at the crowd. We envision a shared space. Open-air classes, local markets, quiet places for reflection. We are not taking anyone's home. We are restoring balance. Murmurs of agreement. Some nods. I stepped forward. Excuse me, I said. That's my land in those photos. Karen didn't turn. That's the proposed zone, yes. You didn't ask. You just took pictures. Then submitted a zoning change behind my back. Now she looked. Mr. Mercer, you failed to participate in our outreach efforts. You mean the letters accusing my goats of violating community aesthetic standards? Soft laughter from the audience. But not all friendly. I handed my folder to the clerk. Originals. Deed, surveyor maps, tax records. This land's been in my family for 60 years, I said. The fence line hasn't moved. The barn may be old, but it's legal. I'm not part of Mesa Creek. I never opted in. You can't annex my property by PowerPoint. The room stirred. One woman asked, "Wait, he's not even in the HOA?" Someone else, "Didn't we vote on this?" Another, "My backyard touches that field. I thought it was county-owned." Karen kept smiling. "There seems to be confusion," she said sweetly. Mr. Mercer's land exists within a historical adjacency zone, which the HOA was given oversight of in 2009. Technically. "Show me that document," I snapped. She paused. I turned to the crowd. "She can't because it doesn't exist. The county confirmed it. There is no jurisdiction claim. This is a land grab wrapped in yoga." That got a few laughs. Real ones this time. After the meeting, people came up to me. Some apologized. Some offered advice. Some just shook my hand. But Karen? She was calm. Serene. Like a villain in a courtroom who knows there's a second plan no one sees. She walked past me, leaned in, and said, "Congratulations. You won the room. But this isn't a popularity contest. It's a paper war. And I never lose those." That night the power went out. No storm. No warning. Just blackness at 9:47 p.m. I checked the breaker. Fine. I called the electric company. They said, "You submitted a temporary disconnect request last week." I didn't. I asked who did. They couldn't say, just that the form was signed electronically. Under my name. Next day. No internet. Router fried. Cell service blocked. Tower maintenance for Mesa Creek area only. I drove to the gas station 5 miles away to file a formal fraud complaint. When I got home, a sign had been staked in my yard. Scheduled for development review, parcel 8B. No logo. No HOA name. Just the words. Big. Bull. Anonymous. I pulled it out, snapped it in half, and threw it in the fire barrel. Then a day later my mailbox vanished. Not broken. Not dented. Just gone, post and all. Dug up. As if it had never been there. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was insane. Who steals a man's mailbox? And then came the email. From an address I didn't recognize. No greeting. Just 3 sentences. "You're not going to win. The land will be repurposed. Save yourself the trouble." People forget HOA has lawyers. No signature. But I knew who wrote it. I drove to Sarah's house on the East Ridge. She opened the door in her flannel pajamas, holding a hammer. I told her everything. She looked tired. But not surprised. "She's playing dirty," she said. "Karen never starts with the legal side. She uses exhaustion. Confusion. Chaos." "She cut my power," I said. "She'll do worse," Sarah replied. "There's one more board meeting. You need to show up. Bring backup." So I did. I printed flyers. I called neighbors who'd stayed quiet. I contacted the local newspaper and handed them everything. And on the day of the next meeting, I showed up with more than papers. I showed up with witnesses, photos, a reporter, and a map of the entire Mesa Creek development, with one thing highlighted in red. The buried storm drain Karen rerouted through my pasture without permission. She thought no one would notice. She was wrong. I don't like causing scenes. I'm not the kind of guy who yells in public or starts fights at meetings. But that night, I didn't come to sit quietly. I came with proof. The Mesa Creek HOA board was gathered like always, buttoned up, smug and sipping complimentary cucumber water. Karen wore a silk scarf and a smirk like she'd already won. But I didn't walk up to the microphone this time. I walked to the projector. The crowd shifted. A few board members looked confused. "This," I said, clicking the remote, "is an aerial photo taken 2 days ago. Right here." I zoomed in. "Is a newly rerouted storm drain running directly through my pasture. Installed without permission. Without permits. And in direct violation of County Code 312.4a. Karen's eyes narrowed. Next slide, a map from the county planning office. Then a screenshot of the construction cruise truck, parked on my land. Then a signed statement from Sarah, who witnessed the installation. I turned to the room. They're trying to pretend I'm the problem. That I'm messy, aggressive, disruptive. But they're the ones breaking laws. Karen stood. "This is slander." "No, it's documentation," I snapped. The room rumbled. One man in a Mesa Creek polo stood up and said, "Wait, we rerouted water lines onto his land?" Another woman, "You said it was community-owned greenbelt." I saw Karen's mask crack. Just for a second. She grabbed the mic. "You people don't understand how liability works. If we don't control the runoff, we're at risk. The HOA is protecting you." Someone near the back shouted, "By bulldozing his field?" Karen flushed. "We haven't bulldozed anything." She shouldn't have said that. Because the next slide, I saved it for last, was a photo taken that same morning. A yellow Caterpillar D6 bulldozer. Sitting at the edge of my south fence. With HOA caution tape fluttering from the blade. Silence. Then murmurs. Then full-on talking. People standing. Someone knocked over a chair. Karen shouted, "This is being manipulated." But it was too late. The board chair, an older guy who'd always nodded along with her, leaned into his mic and said, "I think we need to pause this meeting and contact county code enforcement." Boom. That was the first real crack in her armor. The next day, I got a visit from a guy named Leonard from county compliance. He had a clipboard, a badge, and a lot of questions. He walked the line with me. Took photos. Measured angles. When we got to the spot where the bulldozer had churned up the grass and scraped the corner post of the barn, he stopped. "This is bad," he muttered. "Really bad." She didn't file anything. Didn't notify utilities. And she definitely didn't have jurisdiction. That afternoon, I came home to find a message duct taped to my front door. "You made a mistake. This isn't over." Handwritten. Sharp. No signature. I knew who it was from. The next 48 hours were tense. Karen stopped responding to emails. The HOA posted a vague statement about miscommunications regarding land maintenance. Her second-in-command quit for personal reasons. Then early on a Friday morning, I heard the sound of heavy machinery again. I stepped out onto the porch, heart pounding. This time it wasn't just a bulldozer. It was a backhoe, a dump truck, and 3 men with hard hats walking straight toward my barn. No permit. No notice. I stood in their path. "You're trespassing." One of them looked sheepish. "We were told this was green space under HOA development." "Do I look like green space to you?" He hesitated. Then stepped back. The others followed. Karen appeared on the gravel trail 10 minutes later, heels crunching like gunfire. "You're interfering with progress," she snapped. "No, Karen. I'm stopping a hostile takeover." We stood there. 10 feet apart. 2 forces. 1 land. "You're alone in this," she hissed. "No one wants you here." That's when a horn blared behind me. I turned. 3 trucks rolled up. Sarah was in one. The newspaper guy in another. And the last? Leonard from county enforcement. They'd all come. Karen watched as Leonard pulled out a citation pad. "I suggest you leave," he said to her. "Before you add obstruction of investigation to the list." She didn't move. He raised his pen. That's when she turned. No apology. No surrender. Just silence as she marched back down the trail. For a while there was just silence. No letters. No visits. Karen's car disappeared from the HOA office lot. The bulldozer was gone. So were the golf carts. The flyers. The smug little laminated signs. It was almost suspicious, like that stillness after a storm where you're not sure if it's over, or if it's just the eye. Then 2 weeks later I got a letter. From the Mesa Creek Homeowners Association Legal Committee. It was printed on thick paper, sealed with a gold emblem. It wasn't a threat. It was an offer. In the spirit of neighborly cooperation, the board invites you to discuss terms of peaceful coexistence. We believe an understanding can be reached regarding usage of the scenic corridor and shared access. In other words, please don't sue us. At first I wanted to burn the letter. But Sarah convinced me to go. Not to settle, but to finish it. The meeting was smaller this time. New faces. The board chair looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Karen was noticeably absent. Her nameplate had been removed. I didn't sit. I didn't shake hands. I stood and spoke clearly. "You tried to take my land. You used lies, pressure, paperwork, even equipment to intimidate me. You sent letters, shut off power, and trespassed on property that has belonged to my family for generations. All because I didn't fit your aesthetic." Dead silence. "I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to say one thing. You will never step foot on my property again. Not a single inch. Not for flowers. Not for flyers. If you so much as post a sign on my fence, you'll see me in court." The chairman nodded slowly. "We understand, Mr. Mercer." Weeks passed. The zoning request was officially withdrawn. The storm drain was rerouted, legally this time by the county. The board issued a public apology in the local paper, calling it a miscommunication stemming from unclear territorial documents. I kept the article in my glove box. Not as a trophy. As a reminder. I never saw Karen again. Rumor had it she moved to a retirement community in Florida. HOA free. One neighbor said she was pursuing a less public role in civic matters. Another said she was still emailing the board anonymously under a fake name. I didn't care. What mattered was this. The pasture grew back. The goats stopped flinching at every sound. The mailbox stayed in the ground. And that south fence? I replaced it with steel posts. Painted it red. A line. Not to divide, but to declare. Now, I sit on the porch most evenings, coffee in hand, Rusty curled up at my feet. Sometimes folks honk as they drive by. Sometimes strangers stop to ask what happened out here, what the Karen War was all about. I just smile and say, they tried to pave over legacy. But this land remembers who it belongs to. If you like this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. We share new wild HOA tales every day. Drop a comment if you've ever had to deal with a Karen in your neighborhood. And remember, you don't need permission to stand your ground.